The movie begins with an introduction to a dystopian future where 7 years ago a nuclear war obliterated the planet in just 67 minutes, leaving people no time to react. The survivors fled in scout ships, seeking refuge across the galaxy. The narrator, aboard one such ship, believes they might be the last humans. They change course after receiving a signal from the Pegasus, hoping to find a new home thanks to the sacrifice of its crew. The scene shifts to the spaceship Pegasus, where humanity's last hope lies. The crew struggles with isolation and their mission's pressures. Mike works on the ship, with Pete cautioning him to be careful. They banter about the ship's stability and their roles, with Mike emphasizing his piloting skills and Pete his maintenance expertise. The captain, John, interrupts, asserting his authority and checking on their progress. Mike installs a new valve, while Pete guides him through the process from inside the ship. They joke about sending a child for the job, highlighting the routine nature of their task. As Mike completes the installation, a loud burst startles him, and he ensures everything is secure before heading back inside. Jane and Mike are in the control room. Jane mentions that Thruster Unit 4 is sluggish and offers to run a signal check. She asks Mike about his walk outside, joking about the nice weather. Mike sarcastically agrees, and Jane surprises him by wishing him a happy birthday. Mike is taken aback that she remembered. She mentions it would have been her dad's birthday tomorrow and assures him she hasn't told anyone else. Mike expresses reluctance about celebrating birthdays, but Jane teases him, saying she'll take the present back if he doesn't want it. Mike quickly changes his tune, curious about the gift. Jane reveals that Haley baked a cake for him as part of Lila's cookery class because she didn't want to mess up the ingredients herself. Mike jokes that the cake is actually from Lila and Haley, but Jane insists she commissioned it. Edward informs Pete that he needs to fix the oxygeneration units on the C deck, as the other units are overworking. Pete argues they are safe with the escape pod unit, but Edward points out it's too small to serve the whole deck and is crucial for their survival. John agrees with Edward, emphasizing Pete needs to fix the unit on level C within 24 hours or free up oxygen by going into the pod himself. Pete reluctantly agrees, and Edward leaves to cook dinner. Mike appreciates the cake as he eats it. Jane jokingly asks for the box back, saying she might need it next year. Mike insists it's his now, but eventually hands it over after Jane mentions the crumbs. She then asks to join in, and Mike shares the cake with her. Noticing some cream on her lips, Mike awkwardly offers to wipe it off, which Jane teases as a move to hit on her. Mike denies it, but Jane playfully calls him out, saying after 7 years on the ship, she knows what a move is. Mike insists he wasn't making a move, but Jane, still playful, tells him she'll allow it since it's his birthday. They then share a kiss. An alert sounds, interrupting the moment. Jane is surprised to find a message from the ship Utah, encrypted and meant for the captain. Given the distance, the message was likely sent 4 months ago, indicating its importance. Pete informs John that maintaining the ship's systems has been a challenge. Despite some efficiency gains, they are burning through antimatter at an unsustainable rate and now lack enough to return to Earth's solar system. John decides not to brief the crew, stressing the importance of maintaining hope. During dinner, John plays the message for the crew. It's from a woman expressing deep love and urging the recipient to complete their mission. The crew listens in silence. As they eat, Pete mentions minor repairs, assuring everyone that everything is fine. Edward sarcastically comments on gunning the engines for 7 years on a short-range transport. Pete counters that they make the ship purr. John acknowledges the crafts weren't made for long journeys. Haley complains about the lack of comforts, privacy, proper hygiene, and a decent workout regime. As the conversation grows more serious, John shares the status report from Utah. Utah's target planet came back negative, and they have started their return journey to the fleet. John emphasizes that, despite the bad news, their mission to discover a new Earth continues. Edward laments the 7 years wasted, potentially 14 when they return. Jane points out that all the missions were a lottery, with varying journey lengths and risks. Mike agreed, stating that everyone understood the risks. John encourages the crew, reminding them that as long as they have a mission, they have hope. He mentions the habitable zone of their target planet, and Edward's encouraging long-range scans, though Edward admits it's still a long shot until they send down the probe. Statistically, it's unlikely for any ship to succeed, but they can cultivate their food and recycle water. Edward warns about the potential breakdown of the oxygen system, which Pete is currently repairing. John insists on focusing on the mission, and assigns Edward to handle telemetry once they arrive, emphasizing the importance of their job and the limited resources they have, including only one probe. Pete, unable to sleep, decides to watch a movie with Mike. John heads to the room he shares with Edward to get some rest. Meanwhile, Haley is trying to put Lila to bed. Lila, feeling abandoned, asks why her parents left her. Haley reassures her that her parents are trying to save her, before heading to the room she shares with Jane for the night. The next day, the crew gathers for a meeting. John addresses the group, informing them that tomorrow they will enter the target system. He explains that once they are close enough, they will launch a probe and start receiving telemetry. John then asks Edward to provide more details. Edward outlines their priorities. The first is to find an atmosphere comparable to Earth's, containing nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. The second priority is the presence of water or ice. Additionally, it would be ideal to find an existing ecosystem with edible flora and fauna, although the presence of non-deadly indigenous creatures is considered unlikely. John concludes the meeting by stating that if the results from the probe are positive, they will send a signal back to the fleet before landing. If the results are negative, they will move on to the next target, continuing their mission. He encourages the crew to have a good day as they prepare for the critical task ahead. The crew begins their tasks. Haley checks on Greg. As Greg winces in pain, Haley offers help and accesses the controlled substances locker, confirming only she and the captain have access. She discovers Greg has been self-medicating. Haley reprimands him for not informing her sooner, warning him about the dangers of overdose. Greg dismisses her concerns, emphasizing that dying is the last thing he intends to do, despite his terminal illness. Edward, drunk, approaches Mike and starts a confrontation, questioning Mike's choice of entertainment, and revealing he's been hiding alcohol. Mike suggests Edward sleep it off, but Edward grows agitated and throws the bottle, breaking the screen. Mike, enraged, accuses Edward of trying to drag everyone down with his depression, and threatens him. Edward taunts Mike, claiming the data from the probe makes him the most important person on the ship. Suddenly, Pegasus announces a code orange, shocking Mike. He notes it's unusual due to their distance. The AI repeats the alert, calling the captain to the bridge. Mike confirms the code orange, explaining something has appeared at the edge of their scan range and isn't moving. He prepares to adjust their course for a visual. The three of them, John, Edward, and Mike, stare at the ship displayed on the screen. John almost can't believe it, and Edward agrees. Mike confirms it's real and asks Pegasus for details. The AI identifies it as a standard PT-32 design, the same as their scout ship. Mike instructs Pegasus to zoom in, and they see it's a Chinese ship. John wonders how it got there and suggests it might have launched ahead of them. Edward questions why it stopped, proposing they might have sent a probe, and deemed the planet unviable or they could be making repairs. Mike speculates that they might be dead. The entire crew gathers to discuss their next steps. John argues they are too close to stop now, emphasizing the potential benefits, spare parts, medical supplies, and crucial information. Others worry about the risks, suggesting that whatever halted the Chinese ship could happen to them as well. However, the possibility of the Chinese crew needing help is quickly dismissed in favor of completing their mission first and investigating later if necessary. Pete reveals a critical issue. The plasma overload last week burned 12 cubics of antimatter, and they've already used their reserve. This means they don't have enough antimatter to return home. The crew realizes they need the antimatter from the Chinese ship to make it back. Despite the disagreements, John asserts that they will board the ship to either help the Chinese crew or secure the resources they need. He emphasizes that the information on the Chinese ship's computer is critical and that they have no other choice. John, Pete, and Mike board the Chinese ship but find it empty. As they search, Pete expresses his discomfort with the situation, noting the absence of any crew bodies. John urges them to stay focused and sends Pete to check another area, instructing him to meet on the bridge. Pete reports finding only rotten food and confirms that the atmosphere pressure and oxygen levels are suitable for breathing, though the environment is a bit hot. John instructs Pete to restore the main engine power to get the computer back online, while he attempts to access the ship's logs to understand what happened. John then assigns Mike to determine how and when the Chinese ship arrived and how long it has been there. They note that Haley speaks some Chinese and might help translate, but they need to locate the logs first. As Pete tries to open a door, he spots a man. Meanwhile, John and Mike are examining a recording of another man. Pete rushes in to inform them that there is someone else on the ship. They all go to investigate Pete's discovery. Back on the Pegasus, the AI notifies the rest of the crew about the current status. Jane learns that Pete managed to activate the Dragon's AI unit, establishing a connection. Haley receives files from Mike for translation. Despite many of the Dragon's systems, including internal sensors, still being offline, the captain has ordered radio silence between ships due to a Code 7 situation on board. The three men continue navigating through the ship when Mike suddenly screams, tripping over something. They discover it's a small Chinese boy. Mike carries the boy as they proceed. John tries to communicate with the bridge, informing Jane they found a survivor, but the airlock isn't working. Pegasus indicates the outer airlock is sealed and requires a manual override. Edward reveals he locked it to prevent any potential threats from the Chinese ship accessing the Pegasus. Despite John's insistence that it's just them and the boy, Edward refuses to open the airlock, citing safety concerns and his authority in their absence. Haley intervenes by hitting Edward from behind to calm him down. She manually reverses the override, opening the airlock. Jerry argues that bringing the boy aboard endangers their lives and suggests they should have left him to die. Haley defends the boy, comparing him to Lila and condemning Jerry's attitude. She assesses the boy as malnourished, traumatized, and sedated for now. Pete reports the Dragon's antimatter supply is insufficient to get home. John orders Mike to strip the ship of anything useful, planning to leave as soon as they're done. The crew prepares to extract valuable resources before departing. Mike and Pete gather everything from the Chinese ship. Pete stays behind to finish up while Mike heads back. Suddenly, the airlock seals and Pete is trapped. Jane informs Pete that the Dragon's AI initiated an emergency containment procedure due to a hull breach caused by an explosion in the airlock. John devises a plan to rescue Pete by having him spacewalk across without a suit, but they realize all spacesuits are on the Pegasus. Instead, Pete heads to the escape pod, but it fails to launch. Realizing he won't make it, Pete starts giving critical instructions to John about maintaining the Pegasus. As the situation becomes dire, Pete speaks to Lila, reassuring her and expressing his love. He tells her to relay a message to Haley, apologizing for not telling her everything. The ship explodes and Pete is lost. Mike started playing Pete's recordings and video logs, and Jane joined him. They both got sad and Jane started kissing him. Haley informs Edward that Pete is dead. As they talk, the little Chinese boy wakes up, grabs a pair of scissors, and starts screaming in Chinese. Haley tries to communicate with him. Using the little Chinese she knows, she slowly approaches, gently takes the scissors from him, and hugs him to calm him down. Haley goes to John and reports that the boy is sleeping. She explains that her Chinese isn't great, and even with translation programs, the boy avoided certain questions, especially about his parents and the other people on the ship. Something very traumatic must have happened, but he is not ready to share. John informs Haley that Mike and Edward found the flight log. Pete was right, the Chinese crew burned all their resources to arrive ahead of Pegasus, and the escape pod was launched 6 months ago, leaving the boy alone and feral. Edward explains that the system has 2 planets in the habitable zone, doubling their chances. The Chinese ship's probe drifted out of range, but Pegasus could receive data once they launch their own probe. The second planet will come into view in a few days. Edward joins Mike to watch a movie, but falls asleep. He wakes to find Mike dead, throat slit, and screams. The crew rushes in but finds no evidence. John decides they need to escape quickly. Pegasus warns of a security breach in engineering. Haley talks to the boy who denies involvement, but the crew blames him for Mike's death. Pegasus informs Jane that the captain reconnected panel 42 on A deck, restoring some sensors. Suddenly, John is attacked. Jane reacts quickly and shoots the assailant, saving John. They bring the boy and show him the body of the man who attacked John. The boy reveals that this man was responsible for killing his entire crew. The crew gathers to discuss the inconclusive telemetry data, uncertain if the planet is habitable. Jane suggests waiting for data from the Chinese probe about a second planet, but John says they don't have time due to another oxygen unit failing. With only 2 out of 4 units working, they're consuming oxygen too quickly. Jerry calculates that reducing the number of crew members would increase their survival chances by 30%, sparking a debate about the boys using their resources. John decides they must prepare for landing, despite the risk of not being able to take off again. The crew begins preparing for landing as the ship shakes and alarms go off. Pegasus confirms they have successfully entered the planet's stratosphere. After landing, Edward and Jane go outside to take readings. They find the planet's atmosphere full of methane and nitrogen, making it uninhabitable, like Earth 3 million years ago. They report their findings to John, stating they wouldn't survive more than 2 minutes without their suits. John acknowledges their effort and expresses hope for better luck on the next planet, reminding them they have a second chance. Edward and Jane return to the ship, and Pegasus confirms they are back on board, and the airlock is sealed. They leave the planet. Pegasus initiates the ignition sequence, but Engine 2 loses power rapidly. Pegasus diverts emergency power to the engines and detects a nitrogen leak in engineering. Edward is sent to patch the leak despite limited resources. Pegasus warns of nitrogen contaminating the oxygen supply. John considers sealing the section, but it can't be sealed, only shut down, which would stop the engine. The nitrogen contamination reaches a critical level. Edward searches for metallic tape, and while rummaging through Jerry's things, discovers the weapon used to kill Mike. Panicked, he runs out of the room, but Jerry follows and stabs him. Jerry tells John and Jane that the Chinese kid stabbed Edward. John rushes to the kid but finds him tied up with Lila, who says the boy was there the whole time. John goes to confront Jerry, but Jerry takes Haley hostage, demanding they go to another planet. Haley urges John to protect the kids and do the right thing, so John leaves. Jerry brings Haley to Jane, who angrily punches him. Jerry then slits Jane's throat from behind. John returns with a gun and fights Jerry, but John shoots him immediately. Meanwhile, the children escape using the escape pod and land on a habitable planet. Haley confirms its habitability, and they use the last of their power to send a signal. Pegasus announces the signal pod launch, but the main power is failing, and they are caught in the planet's gravity field. As they enter the thermosphere, Haley asks about their chances of survival. Pegasus responds that their chances are 0, but congratulates John on completing the mission. The movie concludes with the two kids looking up at the sky and seeing the signal that was sent by Pegasus.